Hello, Johnny.
Hi, Alex.
So we're here today. We're talking about TLG, talking
Yep.
about the journey we've been on so far. And I'm going to be asking you some questions. We're going to be chatting about how we've got to where we are and some of the, just the journey we've been on. So I'm actually really excited to do this because I get to pick your brain a little bit
Yep.
more about it. So can you start by telling me, or telling us, how did you first hear about TLG?
Yeah, it's really exciting, actually. I mean, this is the conversation we've had down in the pub a few times over the course of this journey. TLG, Transforming Lives for Good, a charity that I think first came on my radar in 2015 now. Before I was the pastor here at Hope, I was the youth pastor here at Hope. And before that, I was working for an amazing charity called Wirral Youth for Christ, which was a schools work charity. And so my role was to go into schools all around West Wirral and latterly the entire Wirral, doing RE lessons, assemblies, pulse groups, we'd called them. They were like modern day CUs. I was in the local schools all the time, and I met a guy in Hilbury High School, which is, for those of people who aren't aware of the geography of the Paradise Peninsula that is the Wirral. It's about a mile away from, probably a mile and a half. My maths is terrible. My perception's terrible. But I met a guy called Vinny Devonport there. And at the time I met him, he was the RE teacher. He was head of RE. And I heard these rumours go around the school every time I went, like the first couple of times I was in, saying he's the best teacher that kids have ever had. Like loads of kids would come up to me and say he's the best RE teacher we've ever had. He's just the best teacher. Yeah. And so I got to know Vinny, I got to do some RE lessons with him. I got to witness firsthand the way he taught. And latterly, as that kind of progressed, I moved roles. So I became the youth and children's pastor here at Hope Church in 2015. And so I'd known Vinny for a couple of years. I got to tell him that I was getting this role, and as part of that transition, I would be in Hilby more because I was able to focus with this role here on just a couple of schools, and Hilby was one of them. And so we got to work in even more. At this point, he became the head of pastoral care, and I always used to joke with him that he had the biggest church in the world because he was pastorally responsible for 1,400 kids. He was also an Elim minister in Wallasey, and in his spare time. And so we used to get together, and he had his office, and we used to get together and chat and talk through some of the issues that he was facing as the head of pastoral care in this local comp school. And so then I started to just react to situations with him. So he would quite often phone me and say, I've got a kid who's been kicked out of class. Can you come and spend half an hour just chatting to them? So we began this one-to-one mentoring. And so the way I heard about TLG was through Vinny, because schools, the way it works in schools is they have a pot of money, and they can help students who are really struggling mainstream education. Maybe they're exhibiting behavioural issues or non-attendance or anxiety issues or whatever that is. And they can send these kids to what's called alternative provision. So it's basically the schools recognising that they can't cope for that period of time in mainstream education. So Vinny had said he'd heard of this charity called Transforming Lives for Good. They open these, what they call education centres, alternative provision schools. And so I should go away and have a look at opening one of these schools. So that was really, in a nutshell, the start of that journey.
2016.
2015,
2015, wow. So it's actually been, like 7 years ago.
7 years, yeah.
Wow. I don't think I knew that. I probably did. I might have forgotten.
But it came at a really interesting time as well. And as we'll get on to, I'm sure, with some of the conversation, the visionary in me kind of went, this could be incredible.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was working with a local youth worker, Dan, and we were working out of a youth hub in West Kirby, which is, again, down the road from here. And there's always been rumours that they were the council-owned youth hub, which is where we were kind of borrowing in after-school stuff, they were going to sell off. Okay. And so, again, it all kind of dovetailed into this, we could take over the youth hub and we could get TLG involved. And then the kind of bombshell that when I had a conversation with TLG of the the financial model that they had at the time,
Yeah.
and where we were as a church. Like I just started as a youth
Yeah.
pastor, and we'd got funding for that, so we weren't even like
Yeah.
properly self-sustaining
Yeah.
that. And the pastor was here, and so it was just me and Buddy, the pastor, and so the idea of the financial implications of what opening the
Right.
school was going to be just meant that it felt like a very clear no from God at that
Yeah.
point. It just wasn't possible. So then I just threw myself into just pastoral work within the school, meeting teachers and kids and mentoring and partnering again with YFC, which is amazing, to run classes and all that kind of stuff. So that was where the story kind of finished. That was 2016, and yeah, a few years passed.
So just to pause you there, and then we'll sort of carry on with the chronology, I suppose. But something that just occurred to me then was that must have been quite a well, you must have learned a lot during that period about the role of church or Christians in a sort of formalized way, actually coming into schools and in that kind of not just leading RE lessons or kind of leading groups, but actually doing that kind of mentoring work. You must have, and I suppose being friends with Vinny and seeing that Vinny as a Christian in this secular school, but clearly bringing a lot of his ministry with him to a certain extent in an informal way. You must have kind of picked up a lot. Were there any particular things that you learned, or that you, thinking back, you remember? Yeah,
totally. So I think the thing that when I was at university, I did Christian youth work and applied theology, which basically means that I went to university and learned how to play table tennis and read the Bible a little bit. Obviously, it was a lot more than that. And one of the things that we learned that became so real in my life at that point as a Christian who was going into school to support young people and teachers was this idea of accompaniment. So the youth work talk is that as youth workers, we weren't there to fix young people's lives.
Yeah.
We were there to walk with them through their life. So whatever was going on, we were there, good, bad, indifferent. When they were pushing us away, we were ready when they wanted to come back. And so I had a fair share of that as well in some of the mentoring and some of the downsides to one-to-one mentoring, when you see what a young person needs to do to get themselves out of where they are, and they don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot from just the kind of living out your faith, but in a really, I want to say real way. And I guess in terms of, it's not for me, it wasn't the Bible bashing kind of just proclamational stuff. There's absolutely proclamational space to tell people why you follow Jesus. But more for me, when I became a Christian and when I walked away from faith and then subsequently came back to faith, it was the people that were there for me throughout it all that made the biggest difference in my life. And so for me as a youth worker at that point, and seeing the way that Vinny was, because a lot of people wouldn't know that Vinny was a Christian, but as a follower of Jesus, when you saw the way he interacted with young people, when you saw the way he interacted with staff, the love of Jesus, the fact that he was loved, was just evident to see in everything that he did. So that would be it in terms of just the accompanying and being there through the good, through the bad, on all of it.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So moving on then a little bit. So we get to, is it 2020?
Yes, something happened in 2020. I can't remember what, but something globally, maybe.
Which maybe pretend it didn't happen.
But, I mean, this is where the story picks up again. So we've had 4 years. In 2019, I became the pastor here.
Yeah.
And it was the honour of my life to be asked to be trusted, I guess. And you were one of the people who foolishly trusted me with it in a lot of ways. And so to be asked to be the pastor here was amazing. And I took over officially in June 2019. And then by March the 21st, 2020, the world changed in a way that we're still dealing with the after effects. And so during that time of pandemic, the church became what I believe the church is called to be, the hands and feet of Jesus in this world, for one another like we'll talk about it, I'm sure, but this idea of church as a family became so real, and we got things wrong, and we didn't do everything the best way that we could have done. But from when we found out that we were locked down, the unity of this church, the way we came together to still continue services, to continue meeting one another via Zoom and all those other places, to support one another. You know, when something was up, there were people helping, and as part of that, it all links in to the story. So I'll go the long way around because we can edit it. But as part of that, in the kind of end of April, I found out that there was 50 asylum seekers going over the road from here. There's a hotel just a stone's throw away from the church, and they were going there. And at this point, there was quite a lot of talk about asylum seekers and refugee status and migrant crossings and all this kind of stuff. And I found out on a Sunday afternoon. I remember I was watching church online that we'd pre-recorded in the week. So I was watching the end of it. I was in the chat. I was saying how great it was to see people and to talk to people. In fact, I was praying with someone on the chat at the time, and I got a text from someone saying, can you, there was a number I didn't know, saying, can you give me a call? It's really urgent. So I gave this number a call, and it was a friend of a friend who was a community police officer in Hoylake. And she said, have you heard that there's these asylum seekers moving into the Holiday Inn? It's like, no, I haven't. What do we need to do? And she was like, I don't know. And so my instincts kind of kicked in. And again, the type of, I guess, leader I am and the type of person I am is that I just wanted to help. But I had in my mind that there was multiple other people in Hoylake, individuals, charities, churches, whatever it was, that were probably thinking the same thing. Word was starting to get around a little bit that these asylum seekers are here. And so in my head, I thought the worst possible thing that could happen is that we all start to do something to support them, whether it's trying to go in to see them, whether it's trying to provide food or clothing or whatever it was. And so I just, I sent a couple of texts to some friends and said, meet me on Zoom in an hour. And there was 15 of us by the end of it. And people had started inviting people that they knew that I didn't know. So we had charities, we had individuals, we had churches, and we basically from there set out a plan that 9-10 months later would be just so effective in helping people in need. So that's the setup of the scene, because as we started to work with these asylum seekers, we turned our church into a supermarket, which is essentially clothing, food, snacks. The accommodation wasn't great over the road, and so we just set apart time, effort and resources to support them. Down the road at St. Luke's became a youth centre, but for adults. It was amazing. We ran English lessons and support groups and loads of stuff just to work with these guys and see what they needed. And so it was a real picture of the church coming together. It was a real picture of the church coming together, not just with the church, but with organisations. A lot of these people don't believe in Jesus, and they were there helping. We had 5,000 items of clothing donated within 3 weeks. Now, can you imagine? Well, you were there. Can you imagine sorting through that amount of clothing?
I did sort through that.
You did?
Clothing, Johnny.
And then we found out that another local school had history with, in terms of working within for over 10 years at this point, Kingsmead, a local private school, an amazing school with just a real heart for young people to give them an amazing education and to support them growing up. Because of the pandemic and other reasons, they announced that they were closing. And again, it's a bit of a pattern now, but the crazy visionary in me went, that can't be sold for housing. Because I knew that would be one of the main things that would happen, is that it would get sold off to development, which again, no bad thing in itself, but there was just such a rich history there of Christian love, support, seeing young people who struggled in mainstream education would go there. And so I got together with a friend, Kate, from St. Luke's. I think I phoned you, and the initial reaction was, well, Johnny, you're mental. Because
surely not.
Because the idea was, the idea that I touted was, let's ask the Kingsmead trustees to give us the building, because at that point we're working with the asylum seekers. Well, we can set up a HMO there, so we can take asylum seekers and support them. We can open up the grounds to some ecological stuff. We can turn the cafeteria into a cafe for and soft play and all this kind of stuff. And so my mind was going, my ministry missional heart was just beating of what this could do for us as a church and for us as a community. And Kate, who is like I said, a good friend of mine, she works at St. Luke's. She ex-NHS director, so she is the person who I go to with crazy ideas because she gets it from a church point of view. But she also goes, well, let's put some numbers on this then. And so we started to do numbers, and we were looking at £250,000 a year running costs. And so at that point, I remembered my conversation with Vinny. And actually, in this week, in a 2 weeks period, we found out that Vinny had died from cancer. He'd had a short battle with cancer and passed away. And so I was reeling from that. And again, God's timing and all of this. I went, well, if we're trying to find £250,000, then, another £50,000 is not going to be the end of the world, because that was always the problem, the cash flow. And so let's put TLG in, because we're in a school. It's got everything we need. Let's open it. Let's throw TLG in. So we threw TLG into the mix, and the trustees of the charity came back and I must say as well, this sounds like I've just gone completely off on my own. I'm trying to remember. I had gone to our leadership team. If you remember the meeting, why don't you recount the meeting?
Discuss it with us.
Why don't you recount the meeting that we had from your point of view?
So I'm trying to think of an analogy. So it's a bit like, when my son comes to me and says, "Mummy, I've had a really good idea. I want to turn our house." Actually, he said this yesterday. "I want to turn our house into a restaurant." I'm still not entirely sure why. And the idea passed reasonably quickly. And you're like, okay. Yeah, maybe it was a bit like that. No, it wasn't really. So I think we really liked the idea of, and I think this is where, from my perspective, I could see vision developing, is it felt like, one, because of lockdown, we'd been really very physically constrained. And also, I think just because, times change, so you'll have had things going on in the church for a period of time, and then they come to a natural end, and the kind of, just flow of things is then there'll maybe be a bit of downtime, and you regroup and think about what you're going to do next. And to a certain extent, to me, I think it felt we were in one of those periods where, community-wise, there wasn't as much going on as there previously had been. And I obviously was... I loved the work we were able to do with the asylum seekers who were nearby. And that kind of, I think, gave me a bit of a buzz about what we should be doing, what we could be doing. So, we did talk about it a lot. And I think, as you say, it was the numbers thing kind of was consistently there.
But it was.
I am told this is just a pastor thing, though. So pastors, don't... So in every church, there's like a visionary pastor, and then there's a really frazzled-looking accounts person. Ours is Chris, who's just sort of shaking slightly and twitching.
It wasn't just Chris. There was a number of us
we were all twitching a little
bit.
But
again,
about the numbers.
Whether this was just a bit of kind of carry on, Johnny, go and have some fun with it. But there was definitely a shift in our team at that point, because this was such a outlandish idea, and this was such a but people caught about what the principle and the heart behind the idea was. And so Kingsmead came back and they said, we absolutely love the proposal. We've been thinking about this ourselves, and so they weren't giving us the building, so that was fine. So within that time, the Kingsmead, they came back and said, no, great idea, but they didn't give us the building, which, would have been an absolute miracle. But as part of that conversation, the bursar at the school said, she phoned me up and she said, Johnny, I've just read your proposal. I think one of the teachers could be very interested in part of this. Can I give them your number? And And so I got a phone call from Matt Wilson. Now, Matt and me go way back in terms of me working in the school. So I was on the Staffy lads football team for a couple of years, scored the winning goal, but we won't talk about that. And so I knew Matt fairly well. And so Matt phoned me up and he said, can I just ask you about this thing that you've kind of thrown in to the mix with the proposal? Can you tell me about TLG? So I told him the journey with Vinny in 2015, and it would be an amazing thing to do. And I remember it so well. I was in the car driving from my house, and over the Bluetooth goes, and Matt goes, I cannot believe this. And then he recounted his journey, which was parallel. He went to a church in Upton that I knew very well, and they'd been on this journey of opening up or looking into opening up a centre in their youth centre. And for one reason or another, it didn't happen. But Matt was driving that, and Matt was incredibly passionate about it. And so at that point, and I think what's important to note is the whole way through this, every time it feels like there's a door closing, something happens that opens it. Yeah. And so I've learned over this period just to trust God that it might not be the right thing, and if it's not the right thing, I don't think it'll happen, but we keep pushing. So we said, well, Matt said, why don't I phone my contact at TLG? Fast forward 2 weeks later, Scott and Jack from TLG in Hoylake, they're in the Wirral, at our invitation. And what was an amazing timing again was that Jack had said on the phone, we're in the middle of changing our model of how we run education centres. They'd recognised that TLG are an incredible charity that are gifted in so many areas, and the church is an absolute powerhouse, but they were doing too much of the wrong thing. So TLG now in the new model employ all the staff. They run the centre. They do all of the educational stuff. They meet with teachers. They meet with all that kind of stuff. And the church is the missional partner, the wraparound care, the building, the volunteers in the school. And so that when I was like, oh my word, this is insane. So they're here. We take them round Kingsmead, and we show them this amazing facility which is ready to open as a school because it's just closed as a school. And in the August of 2020, we bring them to this building where we are now. Now this is the main hall, but across the way from us, there's a number of other rooms, all of which is Grade 2 listed building, all of which has been completely neglected over a period of time because we've been so focused on reaching our community that we've forgotten about the building, or neglected it in whatever way, or haven't had the funds to do anything with. And we go for coffee afterwards, and Jack and Scott both say, we think you should do it in the church. And I look at Matt and I'm like, what? And they say, we just think the connection with this place, with its community here, it's a mile down the road, Kingsmead. I say everything's a mile down the road. I'm not sure if it is actually a mile down the road, but it's a fair crack away. And they said, we want the church to be so in this. This isn't TLG coming to rent a building off you. This isn't you running a school, because that would be terrible too. But this is the church and TLG coming together to do what we both do best, and to reach a load of kids and their families. And so I then had to come back to you lot and as the leadership team. And I often think of like I'm out of credits a lot of the time because I tend to come up with the visionary ideas of how we can reach people and how we can change this world, and that's just who I am. And thankfully a lot of you have accepted that about me now. It's probably the best way to describe it. But again, in that meeting, whilst there was lots of questions and lots of tentative movement forward, the heart of everyone there was so on board with what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I think it really was. I got that. I had that sense, and speaking for me, I think for me, using the having been able to use the building in the way that we did for the asylum seeker distribution centre, as we called it, gave me a bit of a fresh perspective about the use of the church as well, because there's different ways you can go about doing things, and you can do things, you can go kind of out to other places in the community, and there's a place for that, and that can be really useful. But then something about using the resources in the building that you've been given, stewarding that and actually using that for some kind of purpose to either further the kingdom or to meet a social need or a need in your community. I think it made me think about that a lot more. And so actually I think I was probably more on board with it. My interest was more piqued at the idea of actually being in the church, and it sort of being something that we really took ownership of and ran with.
And so then that's kind of September time, October, we announced it to the church. We announced a new kind of focus for our church. I guess this is part of that, and this idea of being hope in action, something that we've ran with for nearly 18 months now to this day, in February 2022. So October 2020, we announced this vision for the next period of time that we want to be hope in action. We're going to focus on how we can do that as a church, how we can take that love that we've been shown from Jesus and show other people, and to meet needs that is there in our community. And so as part of that, we announced that we were starting the process of looking at whether we would open a school here. And I remember looking at the slightly confused faces out and about. But as we started to talk about it more, and as we started to go down the road with TLG, signed the agreement that we wanted to do it, they then, because it's a ton of money that they're going to be investing in this as well as us, and so they wanted to do what's called a feasibility study. So they wanted to speak to the local schools, local council, all the key people in the area, to see whether schools would actually send kids to a church or a church building for school. And so the next, I guess, 8 months of that really is tied up within that. But I think it's worth noting that one of the reasons for me as a church leader that was so key for us doing this was it would get it into our mindset and our perspective as a church. The idea of being in our community and being out and living out our faith. That really came across as we started to talk about that. It was fanning the flames of that, so to speak. And so when we came to launch some kind of feasibility groups to help find people, we were inundated with people who had contacts here, knew a teacher in this school, knew someone who worked for the council there. And so we were able to get a huge amount of people in contact with TLG. And in September 2021, I think the date is... they came back, TLG, and said that we've got the green light to go ahead. And so then my whole world...
Then the work began.
Turned upside down, because it's very much, theoretically talking about this. This is actually going to happen.
So we need to build a school.
Yeah, pretty much. And so we then started to look at the building. We worked out that it was going to cost us in excess of £30,000 to do the building work that we needed to do. And so between September 2021 and now, we've raised more than that. It's been the biggest answer to prayer, I guess, that I've seen materially in that sense. There's been so many answers to prayer all the way through, but that was a non-starter years ago. I just never would have. That would have been the end for me. But just the way that God has worked through this has been meant that we're here. We're deliberately filming this just before the school opens, but we're here. The building is nearly ready. We're nearly there, and so then the building work starts to happen. We start to plan. We have to change things because we still want to use the church throughout the week. And there was
Is this where we talk about Ian's toilet block?
This is the part where Ian's toilet block comes in. And in the church, there's only one set of toilets, or previously there was only one set of toilets. And so because of safeguard and Ofsted, it meant that we wouldn't have been able to have anyone else use the facilities, both toilets and all the other rooms, in at the same time. And so Ian Woods, one of our senior leadership teams at the time, he's recently stepped down, but he was adamant that we had to plan in that we would do this, and I would be sat there saying to him, but Ian, it's going to cost another £10,000 to change the rooms around, to put a new toilet block in. Like we've got the money we need. Why we can look at this down the line, and he didn't relent.
He did not relent.
And,
well, it's not in his nature.
And it wasn't just him. There was other people as well. And so
no, so that was actually something that was really important to me as well. I think being able to, in a way, one of the lessons we learnt from the past 2 years, so having done like the asylum seeker work and then moving into TLG, is you don't quite know what the next thing's going to be that you're called to. And so to me, kind of retaining as much usage of the building was, if it could be done, I wanted to try and do it.
So at this point, I was basically looking into loans because I was like,
and
"There's
Johnny
no
was
way
selling his car.
There's no way we're not going to be able to do this." Not me personally, but as a church, I'm looking at ways we can finance this because it's not getting dropped. It's also going to create, when we were talking about the building work, and we were talking about a lot of work, but it wasn't quite on the scale of what we have done now. And so the scale of what we were up in that scale massively, and we were closer to the opening than previously. So we did it. We said, let's go for it. I think learning to live by faith a little bit has been huge in this journey for me. I didn't know where we were going to find the money, and again, without going into specifics, the money turned up literally 2 days after we said that we were going to do it.
It was pretty awesome.
And so it happened, and it's happening, and we've got the toilet block, and so it's going to be amazing. So in the middle of that, we're doing the building work. We're planning some pretty extensive building project here in terms of putting up new walls and creating new toilet blocks and creating rooms that are Ofsted registered in a Grade 2 listed building, which is insane. And TLG say, right, we're ready to recruit now. We need to recruit now.
Yep.
And so we go through this recruitment process, and I know Matt, who we spoke about previously. Matt is a teacher and was fairly senior at Kingsmead. And so I think he's going to go for the job. And so we chat, and he goes for the job, and I get to be on the interview panel, which for me is just out of my comfort zone so much. But we had these two amazing applicants, Matt being one of them, and it became really clear that they were both amazing. And so we offered Amy the teacher role with a view, again, without speaking too much into the future, my belief is that this won't be the last TLG on the Wirral. Yeah. It's the first. And so I really want to impact the alternative provision game on a mass scale here in Wirral. And so Amy has got that leadership ability and abundance. And so hopefully with the experience here, we'll be opening up another TLG centre in another church, and she'll fly. So we offered these incredible people these two jobs, and then we started to work with them, and it's been amazing. It's been amazing to see their heart and their desire for these young people, their heart and their desire for the families, the work of what TLG do has just come alive in them.
Yeah, it's a pretty awesome journey, really, and it's interesting reflecting on it, because I've probably not kind of done the chronology or thought through the chronology in that way for a while. I think one of my big questions around it was, or I think probably something I kept coming back to you with, was around this kind of relationship between the church and TLG. So I think I was probably one of the people asking, well, are they just renting a room? Because if they're just renting a room from us, why do we need to, or, if particularly I think before Ian's toilet block, if they're renting a room from us and it maybe means there are other things then we can't do, what's the why, if you like? And so that was something that I kind of kept coming back to, and I think how it fit into the vision, into our particular vision, church in Hoylake, thinking about our community and thinking about some of our priorities in terms of mission and evangelism and all those things. So what would you say to that? How did the vision for that, how did that kind of partnership element, what excited you about that? How did that grow? And then so once you've talked about that, I'll maybe come back and talk a little bit about how that vision grew in me as well, because I think in a way, I probably, not being someone who ever does schools work, it was, but someone who's really interested in, I suppose, social policy and disadvantage and all those kind of things. I, in a way, probably had more of a journey to go on with that than you did to make sense of it. But yeah, what was your insight on that?
So again, I've had to work really hard at making this not just sound like a vanity project for me as the ex-youth worker of 10 years. I've worked with young people for a long time and loved it and still love working alongside young people. And I worked alongside some of the most difficult to reach young people whilst I was a youth worker. And I think that what you said there is I had the head start because I've done that. But that, if I'm honest, that wasn't the real drive for me in terms of the school. It's huge, and some of the stuff around that is absolutely huge. But for me, as the pastor of the church, and as a pastor who's been a youth worker, when I was a youth worker, a lot of the issues that I would see, like behaviour doesn't happen in a vacuum, like bad behaviour and gang stuff, and it doesn't 99.9% of the time it doesn't just happen randomly by chance. And so a lot of the stuff around the school for me was about breaking some of those chains. So giving young people a space to get out of mainstream education where they're drowning for whatever reason, and giving them some specialised care. So one of the things at TLG, again, talk about some of the things that drew me to this thing, the 1-to-3 ratios, the prioritising core subjects in education so they don't fall further behind, the absolute devotion to get young people thriving in mainstream education, not just surviving. And so how does that fit in with our vision here at Hope Church? Well, our vision at Hope Church is to help everyone find hope in Jesus. And 4 of the ways that we do that are serving our community, loving those in need, powerful prayer and worship, and life-changing teaching. Well, serving our community was screaming at me, because here is an opportunity, and it was only really when the feasibility study came in that I really believed that this was going to make a difference. Because when those schools said, we'd love to send young people, we're crying out for this kind of thing on the Wirral and Ofsted rated school that is small in number and is just all about, the things that we talked about. That went, for me, it was like, that was huge, because as a church, we can get sucked into doing church. We can get drawn into just meeting as a family on a Sunday, having connect groups. But if that relationship with Jesus doesn't change our day-to-day life, then we've missed the point of the gospel.
Right.
And so for me, the school was a way that collectively as a church we could put our stake in the ground, saying this is who we want to be as a church. We want to make a difference in this world. We want to see Jesus help people. We want young people to know that they're loved. We want a chance to break some of these chains. And so in a nutshell, we could talk about this for hours, but that was very much us stepping up into the reality of what does it actually mean to serve our community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I think my journey with it was a few things. So I found it really useful. So TLG shared a document with us, which was a sort of, not exactly a case study, but it was a bit of an overview of how churches could partner. So I'm a specifics detail person, which is why we work well together.
It is.
Because Johnny has some
crazy
big idea, and I can help make it happen with the detail. I'm a detail person. I'm like, but how? That is my... And you're going, but why?
Yeah.
Just to go a bit Simon Sinek there. Anyway, so I wanted to know really specifically what exactly that partnership looked like. I think hearing you talk then actually made me feel more inspired about just having it here, and even without that partnership stuff. And that's something I kind of moved towards myself anyway. But I sort of going back 6 months to a year was really interested in how that partnership would actually work. And I was really interested to hear or interested to read some of the ways in which we can do this. So it's things like being able to, well, having a dedicated prayer group, actually commit to supporting the church, commit to praying for the pupils there regularly. And, you know, to me, with different things I'm involved with, I know how important that is just itself. Also, I think the fact that you could do things like the provision of wraparound care, how that could work with some of our existing youth work, things like mentoring and teaching assistant, all that kind of stuff, that actually it's more than just teach a pupil and that's it. There is more to it.
And we've got, you know, a guy, I'm sure he won't mind me, in fact I know he won't mind me saying, Dan, who recently joined our church, and I spoke to Dan after one of the services and he was a bit emotional, and it was after our TLG Sunday, and he said that he'd been kicked out of school when he was a teenager, and he's currently doing a master's in theology at Cambridge. So what a journey, and what an answer, and what an amazing testimony there. And he was just saying how much this school and what we were doing as a church inspired him, because it gives us all, we've all got a part to play in this. Like, if you're not gifted in working with young people, that's absolutely fine. There's a role, there's prayer, there's support. There's going to be, we don't really, it's been really hard to kind of prepare the church for what we need to do when, because it's so new and we don't know. But I know that as we talk about this in church more, and as we get into this from next week, the needs will become clear, and I know that the church will step up, because every step of this journey, people have stepped up, and it's because, like you said, there's just some inspiration there because of what Jesus has done for us. We can get a chance to physically, tangibly show that in a way. Yeah,
absolutely, and that probably is I suppose links to the second part of my journey on it a bit, which is, so I was listening to Pete Gregg audiobook on, it's called Dirty Glory. It had a real impact on me when I read it. I kept talking about it a lot. And one of the things he talked about, there's a brilliant story in the book where they're setting up, for those, if anyone's not aware of this, it's 24/7 prayer, this kind of really agile, on-the-ground grassroots movement just to get people praying, and they've seen some absolutely amazing things. And Pete Gregg is the very visionary leader of this. And when they were looking for initial premises, someone recommended them. They were kind of looking in central London, and someone recommended or kind of put them in contact with this person who wanted their premises to be used for some kind of Christian purpose. And they discovered that it was previously, many years ago, but many other things since then. I think it's called, I want to say, the Foundry or something. And it's basically where Methodism started, so where the Wesleys started, Methodism. And what I found quite interesting and quite funny was he was saying they'd come up with all these kind of precepts of the movement, and, you know, all very biblically based, but sort of about social action and creativity and centering prayer and worship and all this sort of thing. And it was in kind of 5 very nicely written out principles. And then when he actually went back, because he was trying to find out more about this building and looked back to the kind of the Wesley's initial principles of Methodism, he was like, they're basically exactly the same. You can't really reinvent Christianity because it's pretty eternal. And so that was really great. And then he started looking more into as well some of the work they were actually doing at the time. And one of the things they were doing was they ran out of that building that was the sort of heart of Methodism at the time. They ran a school, because obviously at that time schooling was not universally provided, so most children, really, it was only by grace and favour from local communities that they would have any education at all. So it was seen as a real part of, and this is why I do like Methodism a lot, it's always been seen as a very important part of what they do, to meet social need where it exists. And I had a bit of a light bulb moment, because for me, okay, we have universal education provided, if you want, up until the age of 18 plus in this country, whereas they didn't then. So the particular need they met was they just provided standard schooling for kids. The particular need we've now got, that again doesn't just have people, it's not necessarily provided by the state, it's not necessarily provided by anyone. I mean, there's different groups doing different things, but it's not universally provided, is for those students, for those pupils who have all sorts of things going on, some of which are just unimaginable to us, and some of which just are struggling to engage for whatever reason, and they're at risk of dropping out of school. And we know the personal, social, financial, all those sort of outcomes that are so severely impacted by if you leave school without your GCSEs. You're essentially, it's trying to start the race from 10 miles back from where everyone else is starting it. So while there may not be a need to provide universal education anymore, that is a specific need that is not currently fully being met.
Yeah.
And so to me, I had a bit of a kind of revelatory moment that actually then as church, I think maybe my question had been moving from why us to why not us.
Yeah.
So I was about, well, how does that fit in? Why us? Why does it need to be here, or why should it be here? To, well, if it's not being done, and I think it needs to be done, then why shouldn't we do it? In fact, we should do it. So that was and actually, again, similarly to you, that sort of, to me, then began to transcend a little bit, although it's still super important, and this is going to be a thing that we keep focusing on, how that partnership grows and works, because that's so important. But actually just the fact that by providing a building, because there's stuff that needs to be done to make it school safe. So it's not just a case you could go down to your random community centre and just say, let's whack a school in here. There's more to it than that. It 100%. Actually demands some sacrifice. It demands some sacrificial work that you do to actually put it in, and that's, in my mind, kind of what the church is there to do, is to be sacrificially loving, to show the love of Jesus. So that was kind of my journey on it, I think.
I think that's, so there's been a number of times on this journey where I've thought this is going to be over because of a number of reasons. And I think my motivation as a Christian is to see people get the best out of life.
Yeah.
And so one of those journeys where I thought this might be over was when we started to do the feasibility study, and I suppose I had in my head how schools would react to the idea of a church being a school, and all of the negative press you hear about all that kind of stuff. And so it's been a real journey for me to kind of wrestle with this idea of, there's certain things that is absolutely right for us to do, and certain things that are absolutely wrong for us to do. And so this is a legit school. Yeah. This is an actual, it will be an Ofsted rated school. Yeah. And providing excellent teaching, providing excellent care. And for me as the church leader around that, it becomes about our motivation to help and our motivation to see young people thrive. Yeah. And some of them may engage with youth workers and all that kind of stuff. Some of them might not. But for me, just to show these young people the care that they need was enough reason on its own.
Yeah, and I think from various things that I've been involved with across a wide spectrum of things of kind of I don't really want to use the word outreach. It's just kind of helping people in the community. That the kind of why question, so that you quite often get is, but why did you do that? And I think, to me, even if a young person doesn't necessarily engage in that, doesn't engage with anything else in the church for now, I think, one, they will have been prayed for specifically the whole way through a journey in their education. I believe very strongly that is an incredibly powerful thing. but also that at some point in their life, they may look back, and if they don't, that's absolutely fine as well. But that, to me, the witnesses, they could look back and say, why did they do that? Why did that church have us students in there? They didn't need to do it. And yeah, I like that as a thing to do as church. It's why you didn't have to do it. Why did you do it? Well,
because we care.
Because we care, and because that's the model that Jesus sets. Is you didn't have to do any of that, but you did it
because we care.
Yeah.
And if that can be the message that, why are we opening a school in a church? It's because we care. I care about young people and their lives. I care about families. I care about people in this world as the way it is right now. So hurting and so confused and so broken. Just to know that someone cares can be so powerful. Yeah. And so this is the journey up to now. We've been speaking for a long time because this journey is so detailed and there's been so much that's happened, and it's important to recognize all that's happened. I started writing some notes down about the chronological order of things, and when you start to write it down, and the reason I asked to do this with you was because when you start to write down every step of the way where we thought it was not going to be the right thing, but God showed us it was. It's just an amazing testimony to what God can do in a situation through us as a church. The way I've seen people step up has been nothing short of miraculous in itself, and incredible, and seeing people's heart be set alight for serving our community and caring for those in need and loving those in need. I'm so excited for the next step and what that might be.
Thanks so much, Jonny. It's been really great having the chance to talk about this in this much detail, because although we've talked about it quite a lot, probably not in quite that way.
Yeah.
So it's actually, there's been insights that I didn't have, and I've been kind of walking alongside the process the whole way through, so that's amazing.